the hashtag Ter Stegen out. Now, I know, of course, again, trolling a little bit with the jersey here, but for Ter Stegen and Ter Stegen out, I find that on social media, of course, it sounded like even in my top 5 that I came out with on Wednesday, like I am defending Ter Stegen. But obviously, if I had my choice, I would replace him yesterday with Juan Garcia coming in from Espanyol for his 25 million euro release clause. That sounds unbelievable for a goalkeeper that is pretty gosh darn good. So at this point, we're going to look at the screen share. This is going to be Ter Stegen from last season. So not enough of a sample size this year, and that is Juan Garcia. You see all the different permutations where Ter Stegen has some of the edges against Juan Garcia, which is in total passes per game. But again, that has to do with the team that you're playing on. Obviously, Espanyol does not see a lot of the ball. So why would Juan Garcia be completing a lot of passes? Same thing with the long passes. That's really not what Espanyol is capable of doing. Yes, they like to counter, but they don't really complete those passes at a high percentage. Again, that's percentage, long pass percentage, not necessarily just a number of long passes. So not a great number, 55%. But again, that says more about the system, I think, than actually what's happening there. The shot stopping is what we want to see. The shot stopping number, you see Juan Garcia, a slight edge, and Ter Stegen, not as bad as everyone says that he is. That's not really fair. The aerial commanding of the box, that's kind of the bigger issue, but this also tells you that Espanyol see a lot more work. This is like per match, meaning Barcelona do not really need a goalkeeper, or they do, but they don't necessarily force their goalkeeper to make a lot of saves in the air. And when you say command the box, they don't actually give up a lot of corners either. So Mark Aniter saying this also under Xavi last season, not even under Hansi Flick this season. So that number is so low. It's more about how often he does it, which does come down to things that aren't really tracked necessarily, or tracked at a high level that I don't have access to that. You got to pay to play on those. And you see the aerials 98.1 for Juan Garcia, because at Espanyol, you're constantly needing to cut out crosses and you're constantly needed to save your team and do some things there. Defensive actions, meaning coming off his line and doing stuff. This is interesting too, because you see Ter Stegen last season didn't really have much to do at all. This is just, again, a testament to Barcelona's possession and control over matches, even though, yes, under Xavi, requested control. But then, yes, defensive actions by Juan Garcia, constantly being forced to put himself in good positions, and he does that. So as far as we see the XG, the goals assists, very similar. The two of them, a 70.9 for Ter Stegen and a 76.9 for Juan Garcia. And that is a number, again, I think we kind of confuse people. It supports Ter Stegen a little bit more than you would even think. And as we're doing this, I also just want to add Svellier to this, as well as Verbruggen. So we're going to add these two as well. And then you get to look at it, the yellow being Verbruggen here. Again, not even average, but a good goalkeeper and all these different things. Again, we're looking here at the short pass percentages, with Ter Stegen actually being last on this list, the highest being Xavier, who's very good with his feet. Shot stopping, that is what the tall Frenchman does at an elite level already. Again, he's only 23 years old, and he makes the stops he needs to. And then you see Verbruggen under that for Brighton. Young goalkeeper, and still has, I think, a ways to go. Not necessarily if he were to arrive, that would actually kind of fit the timeline a little bit if Ter Stegen's not ready to go. And with Szczesny accepting that renewal, I had Szczesny here and here, but on the rundown. But if he just can accept that renewal, we don't really need to talk about him. That's pretty much it. And then Iñaki Peña, I think he's definitely gone. When I say transfers out, I did forget to mention Iñaki Peña. I can't imagine him sticking around for any reason. So yeah, we see the numbers here, and Juan Garcia, as far as a goalkeeper that's going to save Barcelona's bacon, this is kind of what I've been talking about now, as well as there are multiple factors here. Visca Barca, you're saying, what about Dibu Martinez? I'm not really sold on Dibu Martinez, and we can pop him up here too. Let's get rid of the other ones, and let's just do Dibu and Juan Garcia. So you say Dibu, yeah, he's higher defensively in some of those actions. He's the same age as Ter Stegen, 32. But I don't think Dibu is an upgrade on Ter Stegen. I think there is an aura thing about him, sure. But it's his attitude, though. Listen, the attitude is, I think, a great thing to have that kind of confidence in a goalkeeper. But what I don't like about Dibu, not only is he 32, but I think he would cost a little bit too much. I don't love the number for Dibu Martinez coming away from Aston Villa, a team that will next season be playing in the Europa League. So yeah, with European football and Dibu Martinez being with his contract to Aston Villa, I wouldn't go for that. I think they should go hard. I mean, they are. They're going hard for Juan Garcia for a reason. It does seem like Xavier is not necessarily an option at this point, and Verbruggen might be the cheaper option from Brighton. But even Brighton, why would they want to get rid of their number one goalkeeper? No reason to do that either. So I think the choice is Juan Garcia. I'm hoping by the time that if I release this as some kind of video VOD after the fact, that Juan Garcia is already a Barcelona player and he agrees to that because Juan Garcia is the only option there at goalkeeper. So what does that mean for Ter Stegen, though, if Juan Garcia is arriving and Chesney has accepted that renewal and Naki Pena is heading out the other way? The problem with getting rid of Ter Stegen here, and the reason why, again, people are arguing that, oh, I'm defending Ter Stegen. As I said, if I have a choice between Juan Garcia and Ter Stegen, I'm taking Juan Garcia at this point 9.5 out of 10 times because he is still unproven, if you want to call it that, in Europe. But again, guys aren't proven until they go and they do it. So the only reason he would get proven in Europe is when he comes to Barcelona, and then he has to prove it at that kind of stage. For Ter Stegen, though, the problem to get rid of him is that, one, not only, yes, he's a captain, all those things off the field, sure. But what I don't like is the way that the fan base, we know that Barca fans are pretty toxic here. And this campaign to try to get him out isn't going to get him out. This forcing him out is happening between the club and him. And I don't think the supporters are helping this in any way. So there is one thing where you can have your support, or you could have your detractors. Like if I have a bigger platform as well, talking about FC Barcelona, but if I were to have a problem with, I don't know, some player from the past, like let's say I had an issue with Pedro, right? That's a player that there'd be no issues with Pedro. But if I had an issue back in the day with Pedro and I started this campaign, Pedro out, oh, I don't like Pedro, get him out of the club, da-da-da-da-da-da. My traction that I'm going to have is not going to be enough. But there's enough detractors around the club, not only in Catalonia, but internationally. And he's a player that is a bit online, that does speak English. So Ter Stegen out is not, you don't need to necessarily be a fluent in any language to know what that means. But yes, he's fluent in English anyway. And so pushing him out in that way by the supporters doesn't feel great. As I said, people kind of pushing on me that I called him a top 75 player, but he is. He's been a faithful servant of the club for a long, long time, and he has had his issues in net. No, he's never been an elite shot-stopping keeper, but as I mentioned, the way that Barcelona had been built as far as a ball-playing goalkeeper, because that is something that all these managers with him valued, even Ernesto Valverde and, of course, Quique Setien, and dating back to Luis Enrique when Ter Stegen first arrived. All these goalkeepers but all of these managers have really prioritized keepers that are good with the ball at their feet and are able to play under some pressure, generally with a higher line. And with a team that's going to have a lot of possession, you got to be really focused because you're not getting a lot of action. And that is what Ter Stegen, I think, has done at a really good level for a long time. Now, between the ACL injury and maybe a bit of form as well, he's been out for a whole year. And he isn't that shot-stopping keeper that I think fans are now clamoring for with an even higher line. With the way that breakneck, risky football that Hansi Flick plays, my argument for Ter Stegen leaving the club is kind of threefold, but I want it to happen in a way that makes sense for all parties. Because, again, I don't think it's fair to Ter Stegen. I will say this. I don't think it's fair to try to force him out the same way they tried to do with De Jong, with Araujo, with Ansu Fati, all of which did not leave. So this campaign to get Ter Stegen out isn't going to work. That's not what's going to happen. And the club, is likely behind the scenes trying to pull some strings, try to force him out as well, because he does have a huge salary, as well as having that deferred payments. So there is some frustration with the deferred payments on the club side of things, because for a player that did them a favor, now you have to, very much like Araujo with that extension, and with De Jong, now you've got to make good on the promises you made when those kind of players helped you out with those deferred payments in the past. So, that's what you got to do. You can't just say, hey, we don't want to do this anymore because we're actually ahead of schedule and we're not struggling as much as we were, but financially we still need your help to leave the club. Like, you can't ask players to do that, and they're not going to do that. So in the case of Ter Stegen, as I said, he's made the number of appearances for a goalkeeper. I think he's just behind Zubaretti and Victor Valdez. So I think he's like third on the list on all-time appearances by a goalkeeper in FC Barcelona history. So yeah, you don't have to love Ter Stegen, but understand the issues that's going to take in getting him out of the club and just trying to force him out because it's the right thing to do. It's like that's some noble thing to lead FC Barcelona. Hey, if they're going to win a Champions League next season, he wants to be a part of that club, and he wants to be in the starting goalkeeper position when this team is going to win the Champions League next season. That's what Ter Stegen wants to do. So, and if he's a player who doesn't believe that he can do that and you're a goalkeeper, then you're not a professional footballer. He believes he's going to do that. That being Barcelona are paying him with deferred payments to do that. That's why he's going to try to stay, right? But if Joan Garcia comes and takes his spot a year before the World Cup, that just kind of force his hand. So if the club is going to force his hand in that way, well, then that puts a decision on the player, and he can either, I guess, sit on the bench and make that money and then hope that he still has the number one spot under Julian Nagelsmann for Germany, or he can leave. So that's kind of the thing with Ter Stegen. As I said, I don't think the campaign by the fans, not only would it not do much of anything, because we're really just talking about his contract and deferred payments and the issue that the club might even be having with him. And I don't like the way that our club even goes about that. Like, just not saying make better decisions, but don't put yourself on the hook for bad decisions. And if you're going to have to pay for those bad decisions later down the line, well, then kind of eat crow and accept what you took, And I think for Barcelona, don't make bad decisions like that. That's kind of I know it sounds pretty harsh, but that's kind of what it is. Like, you're paying these players they helped you out in the moment that you needed them. And now when you're in a better spot, trying to force them out, I don't know, leaves a bad taste in my mouth.